Welcome to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Daryl Muller, Chief Operating Officer at the Equipment Leasing and Finance Association. Thanks for joining me, Daryl.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. Glad to be here.
No, it's glad to have you on here. I took a pause because I wanted to add Corporate Secretary as well, but I knew if I tried to get all of that into one thing, I would stumble over my words. So wanted to make sure I got the full title in there. It just took me a second to get through it.
That's okay. I usually will drop that part, but it's an important part of the association and kind of our governance. So I'm happy to be in that role as well.
Perfect, Daryl. Well, appreciate your time today. Look forward to learning more about you. I've had the pleasure of meeting you a handful of times in person at some different industry events, but truly have not gotten to know Daryl Muller. So looking forward to diving in a little bit more and learning about your career and also talking about the ELFA and what we can expect for the rest of 2025. So I guess I'll be quiet and let you introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, again, thanks so much for having me. It's really been the one consistent since I joined the industry is how welcoming everyone has been, and what an exciting time it is to kind of join the association, but the industry on kind of a really momentous time and kind of where we are. But to take a step back, I'm a Louisiana native, but I've been in Washington, D.C., where I'm based, has really become home. My grandparents were a big influence on my life. They lived here in the DC area. They worked in public policy and really inspired my path. And so when I came for college, I haven't looked back. And since graduating from the George,
I was gonna say, where'd you go to school?
Yeah, so I went to George Washington University, right in Foggy Bottom, DC, near the State Department undergrad. And then I got my master's in policy management from Georgetown, so right up on the hill.
I was at Georgetown when they were Big East. I guess they're still the Big East. Was that before the Big East completely imploded? Because I'm a West Virginia alum myself. So I don't even know. You're probably way younger than I am.
Yeah. It was after. It was actually, I had a kind of unique experience right during the pandemic, where when I was going through the process, I applied thinking I'd be kind of going. Yeah. Well, I got my master's way later in life, so about 15 years into my career. So it was a little bit of a kind of leadership program further along the lines, but thought I'd be going up to campus every day, and then the pandemic happened. So what became a 2.5-3 year program, almost entirely virtually. So got very familiar with Zoom, kind of doing work asynchronously, and then by the time we were graduating, had the opportunity to go back to campus for a little bit and get to meet folks, but it was certainly a whirlwind of 2 years between work, pandemic, and then adding in grad school to the mix.
Yeah, working and getting your master's at the same time. And at least you saved on commuting, hopefully, right?
A little bit, yeah. And it certainly saved on the time of the worry of getting across town in DC. Traffic is a real thing that many people have probably experienced. So it worked out.
Excellent. All right. So let's keep going into your career. I'll shut up now.
No, not at all. It's great. So I did things a little bit out of order from kind of between undergrad and grad school, but in between those opportunities, my career has really spanned various sectors in the public policy sphere, and that's kind of what made that grad school choice really natural extension of the work that I was doing. I'd worked for media companies like Politico and National Journal, which was owned by the Atlantic, consulting firms and trade association. What kind of been consistent and kind of led my path here to the ELFA, was a focus on strategic operations, organizational leadership, and team management, and that they've all been at membership-based organizations where kind of the work we do is driven by the members that support a larger mission. And so I've been really excited to join after 8 years at the National Association of Manufacturers, the NAM, which represented the entire manufacturing industry in a membership capacity, where we were working with not just small and mid-sized manufacturers, but also had the opportunity to expand the work we were doing with our members through some mergers and acquisitions of other trade associations.
Now, was there, I guess when we're talking about that, was there a lot of service providers in that association as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And the work that And we'll tap into this probably as we go into like what brought me to the ELFA, but the membership is really broad. It was about 2,000 different organizations. Some of them, 15% were kind of like Fortune 100 companies. Majority of them are small and mid-sized manufacturers make up the industry, and then the companies that support them within it. So, law firms, technology firms, consulting firms, tax advisory organizations, vendors. And so it gave me a really interesting insight into the manufacturing economy and all the different players that it takes to produce things here in America and get them to the businesses that are going to utilize those end products.
Similar. Sounds like a similar setup to the ELFA.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll let's go into that then. So what attracted you to join the ELFA, Daryl?
Yeah, I mentioned that I had worked at the NAM for about 8 years, but I've been over a decade. And what I like to think of as like the manufacturing economy. So my time at the NAM was focused on small and mid-size Fortune 100, 500 companies that were going through their digital transformation, preparing for Industry 4.0, automation, AI, and then more recently in the space of R&D, innovation, and new product development, as many companies, many of like our own, are thinking about how they look at organic versus inorganic growth. So very similar trends to what we're seeing in the ELFA and the leasing and finance industry. Prior to that, I was at another association that was between manufacturers and distributors in the healthcare space. And so I've had this interesting opportunity being kind of now in the manufacturers themselves on the distribution side. And then when I learned about ELFA and the important role they play in the manufacturing economy of helping finance the equipment that businesses are using to run their day-to-day operations, but also thinking about how they grow, I got really excited about learning not just about a new field of business, but also a new part of how we think about kind of the growth of what we're doing here in the US, but also globally. And a part that many people aren't familiar with, but is incredibly important to ensuring that we continue to have a thriving economy.
Oh, absolutely. And then focusing on the technology side real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you take a look about that, the digital the digital transformation for even the manufacturers back then, when you take a kind of a look at like our your association members, I guess, and still see some of the way they're doing things. We're not alone. It's not just,
yeah,
that
certainly
isn't alone.
Not alone. And there are a lot of different factors that come into play. I think when we look at the technology adoption more broadly, and so in the manufacturing space for a lot of companies, it was a question of kind of equipment that may or may not have already been ready for kind of the next layer of technology, but it's also a workforce component. And so I think we see similar things here and on the industry as well. So on the manufacturing side, and what we were seeing was, they are actually much further along as an industry because they've been doing industrial AI for a long time. Now the question is, what do we do with generative AI? And so, and then the second component with like just AI and technology itself is the idea behind the workforce component. And there's a real workforce challenge in the manufacturing space, and there are a lot of vacancies, and that will only increase as we see generations start to move out of the industry and into retirement. And one of the best ways to solve for the workforce crisis is looking at additional ways to add technology in so that people not only want to stay because they have a new skill set, but when they're coming into the industry, they're excited about it because the menial tasks or the things that people don't want to do have been automated. And the things that provide kind of creativity, soft skills, professional development are the ones that they're spending their time on. So we see that in our own industry as well, right? As we, and it's one of the same places. Yeah. But I think it's different for the leasing and finance space is that there's, two, I think, components of it. One is highly regulated, certainly for our banking members who have very specific requirements and restrictions. And so as they look at new technologies, they're also compliance and the costs associated with it. And are they the right technologies at the right time? And especially when there's a lot of proprietary data or financial data that has to be secured. The other part is the people, right? I mean, we have a workforce that is highly focused on the relationships that they built and the processes they have made them successful. And so Well, as we look at technology itself, it's both everything from the data we have access to and how do we harness that for better decision making and kind of better, greater insights. But it's also understanding what are folks actually doing as through their processes and how do you support those through new resources, new technology, leveraging AI in a way that is going to help them move the business forward at the same time that they're achieving their goals.
Well said, man. People shouldn't
Thanks.
be fearing the AI portion of it.
Yeah.
It's only going to
Yeah.
accelerate processes and make us more efficient. It's not going to make anyone a superhuman. It's there to complement.
Absolutely.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, it's exciting one. It's one like, we're going to tackle pretty soon. So in the last year, our change, most people are familiar with ELFA's operations and technology conference at member direction. And to kind of the point we were just talking about, it's evolved. So this year, September 8, 9, 10, we're going to do the innovation conference. So the first time we're going to bring those groups together and really think about like the future of not just kind of operations and tech, certainly, but what does innovation look like when you're thinking about like the data components, what are the processes from the operational side, and then the technology more broadly, and how these things are all working together and being supported by people and the workforce to help us think about what the future of the industry looks like.
Registered, looking forward to it. Plus,
Good.
Denver's a good time, especially in early September. So
yeah,
excellent. So it's been when I meet you in Orlando. Was that your first baptism by fire? I guess we'll call it. It's like first couple days of the job here.
So the very early days, got the opportunity to come down for the executive committee meeting and then the executive roundtable in Orlando, an opportunity to meet a lot of folks. Certainly a perfect time to join the organization as it kicks off really the kind of the meeting series for the year, and hear from kind of the senior leaders within our industry on kind of not just what they're working on day to day, but what are some of the issues that they care most about and are top of mind, and then kind of how we as an association can support them on a day-to-day basis.
And pardon my ignorance here, but as I think I mentioned before I hit recording, actually I think almost the day that this goes out will be my 20th year, starting in my 20th year. So I really don't know any other trade associations I got in here when I was 23. So compared to the other trade associations that you've been a part of, Daryl, like what are your observations in 5 months of equipment? Is it similar, or are we built a little different?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first, congratulations on 20 years. It's really impressive. And I think that's my very first observation that I found since my time in March, but the opportunity to meet folks at both industry events and things that ELFA has done. And when folks have been in our offices, that the people and members are so incredibly connected to the association and care so deeply about the industry itself. Certainly that's the case in other places, but the tie back to ELFA, supporting organizations like EF Cares, the Monitor, and some of our partners. It's a really close-knit community where the feeling is not necessarily competitive, but instead like how are we kind of working with each other to advance things forward. And I do think that's really unique from what I've seen, not just in the associations I've worked with, but the other association communities that I've had the opportunity to interact with and other association leaders. The second part is just the resilience of the industry itself and the really unique place that the equipment finance industry has within the economy. When we think about some of like the biggest flashpoints over the last 20 years, whether it was 2008, 2009, and the financial crisis, is it kind of the mid-teens, with everything from like tariffs to some rising inflation? Was it the resilience of through the COVID itself? Each time, we knew it instinctively, and what we hear from our members, but we also see it in the data when things like the CFA report of the Survey of Equipment Finance activities that the industry does really well. There may be dips, of course, but the rebound is also very strong. And that is a really unique place because it lets the industry focus on growth and moving things forward. Like, hey, how do we build off that strength? And it gives us a little bit more cushion as well to take risks. And many times we think about innovation because we know that we've been able to weather difficult challenges. So now we can think about what does the future look like, and where areas that we can push outside of our comfort zones. And that leads back to kind of one of the things we're seeing, and is, the growth mindset of kind of the industry, and willing to take those risks, invest back forward, and think about, how do we continue to build on what we've been doing so successfully since the organization's founding in the early 60s.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I know I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, so I apologize for that. So, the association brought on Lee Lytle as their new CEO to replace Ralph Petta, last year, and then I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts real quick on, how that transition, I guess, has gone. It's not going, it's gone. And then there's other kind of just leadership changes at the ELFA too. I just kind of wanted to get your mindset and thoughts, kind of, Daryl, how things are going.
Yeah, transitions can be hard, in many cases. But when we look at kind of how well the transition from Ralph's retirement to Lee's onboarding has been, it's really exciting. And it really speaks to the testament of the board leadership and kind of the industry support of kind of where things are going. Ralph helping be supportive in the CEO transition, and giving time for the executive committee and the search committee to find the right talent and the right next individual to lead the association was critical. And then Lee's onboarding over the last year and a half has had such amazing support, not just from the board, but the larger community. And I think she was on with you about this time last year, talking about kind of her first 9 months and kind of what does convention look like. So it's, exciting to be here, right? And I really feel honored to be another year in, where under her leadership, she's really taken the feedback of our members on the board and the pulse check where the industry is, drawing from her experience, not just in the Federal Reserve, but also in fintech, to say, what does the future look like? And hearing her vision is really what helped bring me over to the ELFA as well, as kind of a shared, not just sentiment, but vision for where associations can be and the roles that they can play, and serve being a kind of a modern organization for innovative industries. And so her time has been about building the right team, kind of getting the right folks into the right places. You talk about kind of like the leadership component of it. Certainly thinking about the evolution of the strategic plan and kind of what was set in motion years ago, but how does that stay refreshed and relevant for kind of where we are as an industry today? And then most importantly, is helping raise the profile of the industry so that people are familiar with the important role that our members play in, a $1.3 trillion industry that has a significant impact on the economy. And that certainly played out in what we saw most recently during kind of the passage of the one big beautiful bill out of Washington. Is article after article feature the important role that equipment has in both kind of mitigating tariffs, but also ensuring that we have the right equipment to continue to thrive in the economy. And right there, in many cases, was Lee being able to tell that story. And so it's exciting to have a leader who wants to be out front, who's helping tell the story, and is building the team internally to take care of the day to day, so that way she can be representing not just the association, but the industry to our core audiences, New York, Washington, and then the fintech folks in San Francisco, and in the industry writ large.
Perfect. And the timing of the passing of that one big beautiful bill, 3 to 5 weeks after Capital Connections, when we were there and lobbying. I mean, come on, perfect time. Right?
Yeah, well, we can't take that for granted. And it's one of the things that continually inspires me to work with trade associations, is the important role that companies and members have in telling the story of how policy, whether it's regulation or incoming laws, legislation, could have an impact on your businesses. And those stories, whether it's with the member of Congress themselves, or is it a staffer who's doing the hard work, is an important part of not just how democracy works at its most lofty, but how on the very tactical it works from helping getting things across the line. And so I don't think there's any that coincidence. I think it is a causality of kind of of having capital connections where our members were so hyper focused on two important issues, which is kind of full expensing and EBITDA, EBITDA, like how that moves forward is going to be critical. And then several weeks later, we saw the impact of kind of where that played out. And so when people are thinking about, can I come to Capital Connections and does my voice matter? It absolutely does. And it's to be way more authentic. You're going to be able to speak directly to your members of Congress around the experiences you're having and why things are important in a way that no one else can. So encourage your participation.
Yeah, I mean, and this, I want to say this was either my 6th or 7th Capital Connections, and
Yeah.
the, I guess the willingness, I guess the impact stories, or I guess as a constituent of Arizona, which is, I would call us a purple state.
Yeah.
Both sides were, I guess, much more receptive to the two topics that we were discussing than in years past. Sometimes you walk in, they're like, who do you represent? You hand it to them, and they're like, see what.
Yeah.
This year it was very, very productive, and you almost left kind of like, okay. They were listening, not just giving me a courtesy because I'm a constituent.
Do you think that's changed? You mentioned that it seems like it's changed over time where people are listening more, or do you think it's because the issues are different, or what do you attribute that to?
I don't know if it's familiarity. I mean, some of these people that I've met with, I think they remember a face. But I also think it's, as a country, as much as we don't think that we're aligned, there's more alignment in the middle. And, some of these senators in Arizona are Democrats, but they know they have to play both sides because we're still a very mixed state. And if you're not pro-business, then this is not a state for you because we're still building. If you look at the numbers in Arizona, it's kind of crazy. And I think the town that I live in is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. So you have to be supporting small business. It doesn't matter what side you're on. And I think the talking points that the ELFA team, Andy, Lee, and yourself put together, have to tell a story and why we're there. And I think people just become more receptive. So as much as I think when you look at Washington as divisive, I don't watch the news anymore, man. So I don't have time for some of that stuff. Like, I just think it was just more receptive. But then again, I think there's wins from it. It doesn't matter what side you're on.
Yeah.
1.3 trillion, we're supporting the economy. So
yeah. I think you hit on a really important point, which is finding commonality. And that's what I would encourage anyone to be thinking about in a super partisan time that we're living in, whether it's at the local level, state, federal, or even global, where we're seeing some of these really polarizing issues emerge, is that the most effective way to have conversations is to say, yeah, we are going to have differences. That is human nature, and it's a part of the world that we're living in. But let's continue to find those commonalities. What are the things that we can agree on and have a discussion on? Overcoming together those smaller hurdles certainly creates more opportunity for bigger ones. And in some cases, we're not always going to agree, and that's certainly okay. But we're going to get a lot more done if we can say, okay, what are the few things that we can really see alignment around, and how can we support each other to get those things across the line? I think that's really the story and kind of the top line of how we were able to accomplish what we did on interest deductibility and 100% expensing.
Exactly. There's what is it? The world doesn't have to deal in absolutes. So it's just I think truly the spirit of politics. It's like, look, I know these 2 items, let's just put those to the side because we're never going to see eye to eye. These 10, let's focus.
Yeah. And that's hard because a lot of these things that we're talking about putting to the side are highly emotional and have very personal impact, but so does some of these other components as well. And so that's what our role is, right? Is help think through those and talk with folks about what their experience is and find a way so we can leverage their experience and their voice and kind of what they care about to help move things forward.
I want to shift gears, if you don't mind, Daryl, to
Of course.
Last week's People Power event that you guys had in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had a prior commitment with my my son, so I couldn't make it. But when I looked at the photos and I looked at the different LinkedIn reactions, you know, obviously I'm sure that was kind of a nerve-wracking thing because you're taking three different conferences and you're consolidating them into one. But let's just talk about like how that conference went, and I guess just thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, top line is that I think it exceeded everyone's expectations, our own first and foremost, but what we heard and folks have probably captured on social media is attendees as well, and our members who participated. But for those who aren't necessarily following or who haven't been able to follow along at home, we earlier this year at the ELFA spent time with three important subcommittees: women, emerging talent, and equity, to really talk to them about kind of what the future of those three individual kind of keystone events are, and said, hey, let's bring them together. Because what we heard was folks can't attend usually all of them. They can have to pick. And so we looked at it and said, this is an opportunity to bring everybody together at one time and really think about how we are providing educational programming, networking opportunities, but also visibility for folks that really make a significant impact on the industry. So that was the initial idea for a new summit we call the Power of People. So at the same time that we were planning the Power of People summit with the broader inclusion committee, ELFA was also really looking into the future of the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that the industry has been strong champions of going back to the early 20 teens. But a lot has changed, of course, over the last few years. There were some executive orders that put some restrictions around exact programming that had to be done, but also the conversation was changing as well. And so, but the board felt very strongly in the importance of these programs. On the front end is advocacy and the work we just talked about. The second part is the people that are so integral to the industry today, but also will be in the future. And under the leadership of a subcommittee of the EC, Katie Emmers, Nate Gibbons, Christopher Johnson, and Deb Baker, we thought about kind of how things evolved and what we're really hearing. This is a business imperative, first and foremost, to continue the programming work we've been doing. Secondly, is going to be the fact that demographics are changing. People are retiring out of the industry, and the next generation of workers looks very different than kind of the workers we've had in the past in the workforce. And secondly, it's our job as an industry to be thinking about how do we recruit those in. And so under their direction and working with the committees, we've created a new framework to think about our larger education and workforce priorities, which is attract, train, and retain. So how are we attracting people into the industry itself through many of the programs we've been talking about and been doing, campus to career, kind of bringing folks in through the emerging talent group, the professional communities we built with kind of women or other industry functions. How are we training them? So whether that's kind of programming that we already have in place through the onboarding courses or the principles of leadership and finance, more broadly, our support of CLFP and the work that the foundation has been doing. And then how do we retain people? Thinking about that longer journey on the back end. And that's not just younger talent, but it's also folks who've been in the industry a long time who say, how do I have a place here, whether through volunteer committees? Is it thinking about professional education development? Is it succession planning? And have a broader perspective that brings everyone together. And it becomes part of our ethos as an industry, as an association. And that's where we rolled out at the Power of People Summit earlier this week, or last week now, 2 weeks by the time this goes live, is a much bigger vision for kind of how these three programs can really come together and then layer in the ongoing important work of our historical DE&I initiatives and how they evolve.
So what was the total attendance roughly?
Yeah. So this year we kicked off with around 175 people at the conference itself. It was a 2.5 days of programming where we kicked off with James Grass, the board chair of ELFA, really introducing this format. We had an amazing speaker, Raven Solomon, who really talked about the history of an evolution of DE&I and how important it is to not get hung up on the terminology, but what is the efficacy, and thinking about that next generation. And spent a lot of time talking about Generation Alpha and the difference in generations themselves, and really capture the audience because they went across 4 different generations in the room, and it gave people a way to think about how the challenges we're facing now are no different than the ones that came before us, and there'll be no different than the ones that come next. But how do we prepare ourselves for it? And then all the programming we did kind of anchored around it, both the keynote sessions. Lee Lytle and Reed Rakovich sat down and had a conversation about the important role of CLFP and how its focus is really about finding your why. Why is it important for you to think about your credentialing? Why is it important for you to participate in CLFP? And that's what's going to help motivate you as you move forward. And then we did additional sessions around the future of economic outlook, AI, technology, the things that we really heard from our members they're thinking about. So whether it's at you're very early in your career in emerging talent, or you're much more tenured and kind of thinking about what the future looks like, there's a place for each person. And that's what made people, I think, really excited about this year's event is that, by bringing everyone together, folks got to meet people they wouldn't normally get to. They didn't have to make those choices overall. They had to make choices between breakout sessions that were incredible. But then they also got direct access in a way that is sometimes really challenging with senior leaders and board members who are there, folks much more junior in their conversation that made themselves available for just both introductions and getting familiar, people that you know and are familiar with, but others have to spend a lot of time trying to nurture those relationships and then asking questions of their peers. And so we tried to create more opportunities for that to happen across those 2 days.
Yeah, when I was looking at some of the photos, I was definitely like, okay, I saw some senior leaders, and then I saw, a bunch of people I just don't recognize because I haven't had the opportunity to meet them yet. But I thought that was a unique way of. I mean, that's the hardest part, right? It's just getting all that knowledge, especially when you walk into rooms here. I think we're very welcoming. I think you mentioned that earlier, right? People don't mind giving their time. So everyone's just so close to one another. It can be a little intimidating sometimes to try to want to break into a conversation to say hello. So fostering that environment for the Gen Xers that I saw on some of those photos to meet the younger generation, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, we realize people are doing that in different ways. I mean, it can be intimidating, and it's sometimes intimidating to walk into a room and not really know who you are, walk into a session and say, do I have a place here? And so, part of our focus is, creating those networked kind of opportunities where it's round tables and kind of ways that you're interacting, but it's also thinking about new opportunities as well. And so at this event, we launched 2 kind of new technology platforms that allows people to connect in new ways. One is the ELFA Instagram is back online, ELFA online. You can find us on Instagram at ELFA online, where it gave people a way to like post content in real time, share insights, and kind of connect with their peers. And the other one is a way where you can get more familiar with folks by, we have kind of made an investment moving forward to have photographer at every event. And part of that team is being able to get people not only to see kind of what's happening, but also capture those pictures for their own purposes. And so you can track what's happening. You can get access to the pictures that were taken in real time on an app called Facely AI. And our hope is that helps get people more familiar with each other, but also help tell their story of attending the conferences. So that way, when they meet folks for the first time, they may be able to reference back to that LinkedIn post or say they saw them on social media. And we're mirroring the way the work that we're doing mirrors the way people are actually interacting on a day-to-day basis, which is on social media, is on LinkedIn. And so how does the things that ELFA do become a natural extension of that work in a way that feels meaningful and thoughtful, but also can create an impact digitally as much as it's happening in real time when we're at events together throughout the year.
And now for the people who weren't there, because this is the first time I'm hearing about this, like, are you guys rolling out this stuff via email or is there a web page? Like, how do we find out a little bit more about
So the Instagram has been around for a while. So if you're not following along, you can certainly do that. And we'll certainly make that kind of a larger announcement. There was like signage, events, and I had a lot of support from the emerging talent group and saying, hey, let's bring that back. And so we made that launch official. The second part is that you're going to see now kind of Facely will be an ongoing part of all the events we're doing. You mentioned you're coming to the Innovation Conference in Denver. It'll be certainly a convention rolling out later this year as well as some of the other programming that we're doing. So that's going to be embedded, and then we're going to push it out so you have the opportunity to like really engage in new ways and have access to those high quality images. We talked a little bit earlier about kind of things that were impactful in the industry. The LinkedIn community that the industry has built is really impressive. And so we're thinking about ways, how do we continue to foster that in a way that feels native and gives folks the content that they need to help go back to that other goal we have, which is raising the visibility of the industry. And so, yes, the content we provide or the research that we're doing or the advocacy is really important, but so much of what we're all doing is a visual medium. And so it feels like a natural extension of that work and helping support our members as they tell their own individual stories in the industry.
It's definitely, I would say, spans all of the age groups as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So for sure. And that, that's goes, kind of reinforces what you were mentioning earlier, is I think that's specifically unique. And something that I think very different from kind of some of the other associations or industry I've been a part of, is just how active everyone is kind of within our ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think before we were recording, the Capital Connections this year, I guess the diversity of that group, I've never seen it that way.
Yeah.
6 or 7 years attending that, which is fantastic. I know it's been for 20 years now. I've heard, what are we doing for the next generation of leaders? And it's like, you look at the organization, it's like, same person. You just go it's like, okay, what's going on here? But then you see some of these pictures from these events and newer things that the ELFA and some other trade associations are doing, and it's great because it needs to be intentional at this point.
Awesome. Well, so many of the things that we're doing are coming from member ideas. And so that's where we really encourage folks and industry partners to reach out, whether it's to me directly or as a members of the team that you're familiar with, and share those ideas with them. Because we want to create a culture of innovation, of taking risks, kind of understanding what the opportunity is, but also helping our team at the ELFA, own that platform and say, it's good to do that, right? You should take that idea, run with it, see what happens, because that's where the next great idea is going to come from, and how we can incorporate that to ensure that people's voices are heard, they feel represented, they see new things happening, but we want to know about it. So those folks who are listening here or engaging, please let us know. I know you and I are thinking about some really interesting ways to work together and partner in the future. And that's what I'm really excited about. And that comes from great leadership. And so that's what Lee's really been inspiring the team to do. Certainly James and our board is, Deb Baker coming in as chair-elect as well. And that's what I think really makes this industry really exciting, but also why it's been so successful as well over the longer term.
Nail on the head there, Daryl. So I ask everyone who comes on this program to give me a fun fact about themselves.
Yeah.
So like outside of your work that you do and the political advocacy, what do you enjoy doing in life, Daryl?
For sure. So I love my dog. So I'm married. My spouse is an attorney at a firm in town. We run our second rescue dog now. Her name's Duchess. She's named after Dutchess County, New York, so not too far from where you're going to be in the next few weeks. We spend a lot of time at the beach when we're not in town in DC, right in Delaware. So that's where we spend a lot of it. I am always a sucker for a spy thriller or murder mystery. So if anybody has any great recommendations, send them my way. It's one of the ways I kind of unplug and
Okay.
Those are some of my favorite TV shows.
Cool.
But yeah, so it's been incredible to be a part of the industry, and I appreciate you kind of having me on today, Justine.
No, it's it's great to I love your I guess the sense of curiosity, but you come from this background before. I learned something new today about the technology and stuff that you were doing with manufacturers before, so that's exciting. Not to say that this industry is stale by any means. events, but it seemed like it was just repetitive. It's the same people talking about the same thing year after year after year. So it's refreshing, I guess is probably the word I was looking for, to kind of get some fresh insights to say, okay, evolution's going to happen. Like I think I mentioned before, no meaningful change happens instantly, but like, where are we going? What do we do?
Yeah, it's great. And it's conversations like these that have really helped drive that, is the ability to sit down and listen. Maybe that is that fresh perspective. Part of it's hearing people say we have really big ideas. And part of our role at ELFA is certainly to listen to those and help bring them together and say, hey, here's how we can get there. These things aren't going to happen overnight, right? They're somewhat incremental, but big transformation needs big ideas to start with. And then let's work through those together. And that is where I'm so grateful of kind of my first almost 6 months now in the industry, is people's willing to sit down and give so willingly of their time, but also share like their ideas, feedback, and thoughts without reservation. And then listen on the back end to the ideas that we're bringing back out, and both challenging them, but also supporting them and saying, here's how we make that happen. And I'm certainly grateful for that opportunity, and don't take it lightly. And I'm excited for what that allows us to do, not just for the rest of 2025, but going into next year as well.
Yeah, we can spend a whole other half hour talking about 2026 and everything else, but I think we're good for right now. But we're gonna get a chance to talk about the annual conference that I just signed up for yesterday. There's a lot more time we can have discussing that, Daryl. But I really appreciate your time today. It's nice to get to know a little bit more about you. Like I said, excited for the work that you and Lee are doing. Looking forward to the rest of this year and the future of the association.
Great. Well, thanks much. Well, hopefully that means that's an invitation back. So I'd love to continue the conversation, whether it's about convention, 2026 and beyond, or some kind of other arcane issue in the industry that we're all learning about.
Excellent, Daryl. Well, it's good to talk to you, and we'll be talking soon. Have a good one. Take care.
Okay. Thanks, Jesse. Bye.